A memorial in Paris is coming together this morning to mark the 25th anniversary of the death of Princess Diana. She was killed in a car crash in the city alongside her boyfriend, Dodi El Fayed. That event was a catalyst, and it changed the royal family forever. It also was followed by one of the biggest public outpourings of grief in recent memory. For more, we're joined by Afua Hagan. She's a royal commentator for Vanity Fair and joins us from London this morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Let me just ask you first, because I'm sitting here and I'm asking everybody in the control room, where were you 25 years ago when this happened? Because I remember.
Oh, I remember it so clearly. So in fact, my brother and I had just come in from a party and we just sort of switched on the news while we were having some, post-party food. And we saw this news coming out that Princess Diana had been seriously injured at that time in this car crash. Now, my mother was a huge royal fan, a huge Princess Diana fan. And I kept thinking to myself, my goodness, what is my mum going to say when she found out? So we stayed up all night watching the news, saw the announcement that she had passed. And so we actually crept into my mum and dad's bedroom, went to my dad's side of the bed, woke him up, got him out of bed and told him what had happened. And he actually thought that we were joking. Showed him the news, and then he said, I have to be the one to tell your mum. So he did. And I just remember so clearly her being so upset and so devastated, as if a member of our own family had passed. And I just remember so clearly that morning. It was one of the first news stories, I think, that I'd watched in sort of the 24-hour rolling news effect. And it was just so unbelievable to see it unfold in that way.
So let's talk a little bit more about her legacy. 25 years after her death, what made her so exceptional?
It's such a good question. Princess Diana lives on in the hearts and minds of so many people. I think because when she married Prince Charles, he was 32, she was 20. She was this young, fresh-faced young woman. She lived with her girlfriends in a flat. She was a nanny, and she seemed quite down to earth. And a lot of people thought she would bring a new invigoration of glamour and fun to the royal family that had been missing for quite a long time. And also they'd waited a long time for Prince Charles to pick his bride. And so I think people thought she was the future of the royal family. And they became very invested in her and, of course, in her children and in her charity work. She was one of the first royals to sort of kneel down and speak to children at eye level. She worked with refugees. She worked with AIDS patients, people who had leprosy. She did the famous landmine walk, things that no royals had done before her. And I think it was her affinity and her compassion that people really had an affinity with. She loved people and people loved her.
I think one of the things I remember too, you mentioned all those things about her legacy, but when she walked in that hospital and gave a hug to a patient with AIDS, and back then people were still afraid of, all the stigma around it, and she kind of broke down those walls.
Absolutely. She crossed this divide, so to speak, because what you said is so right. At that time, people were still very scared of how you would catch HIV and AIDS. And a lot of people still thought it was through touch. So for her to walk into that AIDS hospital, to embrace and to kiss patients, to sit next to them, to talk to them like they were any other person suffering from any other illness, really, really crossed that divide. It really, really broke down barriers. And that's what Princess Diana did. She broke down barriers. Like I said, people loved her and she loved people. And she paved the way for a more compassionate side to the royal family through her philanthropic work and through her charity work.
I think one of the things maybe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the royal family wasn't ready for was actually her strong mind as well.
Absolutely, you're 100% correct. The royal family were not ready for a woman who, when she came into the royal family, was quite demure. She was quite shy. And for her to come into her own in that way, they absolutely were not ready for her to do that. They weren't ready for her to step out on her own, become this modern woman and become this king, as it were. When she stepped out in her power and after her divorce from Prince Charles, they weren't ready for that phase of her life either. And I actually think that's echoed in the way that Meghan Markle was treated as well. They weren't ready for another woman who wanted to do things her way.
Yeah, let me get to that in just one second, but I want to ask you about, how she was progressive in that sense. But Diana really was the people's princess, and when she passed away, there was a lot of hatred towards Camilla. Has that changed throughout the years, though? It seems it has.
I think it has, definitely. In the decade or so after Princess Diana passed, it was unthinkable that Charles would ascend to the throne with Camilla by his side. Now, public feeling had sort of stayed the same even up until Charles and Camilla got engaged. But now I think things have changed, and I think that's because the Queen has, quote unquote, given Prince Charles and Camilla their blessing by saying that she wants Camilla to be Queen Consort. Now, when it comes to the royal family, people have a real affinity with Queen Elizabeth II and maybe not so much the royal family. So if Queen Elizabeth II says that Camilla should be Queen Consort, gives her that blessing, then I think, yes, that is going to up her popularity amongst the British people. She recently celebrated her 75th birthday, and there was a huge PR push behind that for her to be seen as, the kind of the every woman. And she's never tried to sort of have the same causes that Diana has. Hers has been more about domestic violence and reading books and things that happen in the country life and in countryside. Those have been her issues, and she's never tried to sort of take over Diana's issues. And I think that's worked well for her. She's tread her own path, and here she is, and when the Queen Elizabeth II unfortunately passes away, she will be Queen Consort along the side of King Charles.
Just quickly before I let you go, what do we expect to hear from the royal family today on this anniversary?
A good question. I think we expect to have statements from definitely Buckingham Palace. We can expect from Kensington Palace, from William and Kate, and definitely from Prince Harry as well. Perhaps from Clarence House also. Haven't seen those statements yet, but we can expect them to be released on social media later on today. Like you said, you have the people gathering in Paris. We can expect people to gather at the Memorial Gardens here in London and possibly at Harrods as well later on today.
Okay, Afua Hagan, thank you for your time today. Truly appreciate it.
Thank you.